All right, so we're diving into Peter Thiel's Zero to One today, a book that really shakes things up when it comes to how we think about startups, and innovation in general.
Yeah, Teal, he doesn't just give you like tips and tricks. He really gives you a whole new way of looking at building companies, especially the kind that are doing something truly new.
Exactly, not just copying what's already out there,
Right. He's all about going from 0 to 1.
not just adding one more of something that already exists.
Yeah, exactly. 1 to N. And that's actually that difference between like making something new and just copying. That's like at the core of his idea about globalization versus technology.
Okay, so let's break that down. He's saying these are two different types of progress, right?
Yeah, and he uses some really interesting examples from history to show what he means. Like, think about the time from 1815 to 1914. You had all these incredible inventions, the steam engine, the telegraph.
Tons of change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you had all this globalization happening, like more trade between countries, people moving around more.
So the world was kind of expanding in a couple of ways at once.
Uh-huh. And then he contrasts that with the time period from World War I to 1971. Huge technological leaps. Like, think about computers.
Yeah, major advances.
But globalization was much more limited during that time.
So it's like two different paths of progress.
Right, and that's his point. Globalization is more about spreading existing wealth around, while technology is what actually creates new wealth. So think about that in terms of startups, right?
Okay, yeah, how so?
Well, are the companies you're looking at, are they actually creating something new and valuable? Or are they just rearranging things that are already there?
Kind of like globalization might be easier, but technology is where the real progress is.
Exactly.
Okay, now this next part is where things get really interesting. Thiel actually challenges the way we normally think about monopolies.
Yeah, he says there are some monopolies, he calls them creative monopolies, that can actually be good for society, which kind of goes against everything you usually hear about monopolies being bad.
Right, so what's so special about a creative monopoly? Like, what are the signs?
Well, think about companies like Google or Apple, right? They've gotten to be so big, not just because they're bigger, but because they've made things that are so innovative and useful.
That they're almost essential now.
Right, exactly. They have this technology that nobody else has, and tons of people are using their products, and that gives them these huge advantages, and they've built these really strong brands.
They've created a whole ecosystem.
Exactly. And he contrasts that with like opening a South Indian restaurant, right?
Okay, interesting comparison.
You're instantly competing with like tons of other similar restaurants, all fighting over the same customer.
It's a crowded market.
Yeah, whereas with something like PayPal, Thiel, and his team, they made a whole new category. They became like the main way to send money online through email.
They weren't just another player, they created the game. So when you're looking at different companies or industries, it's a good question to ask, are the ones with a lot of market share? Are they these creative monopolies that are moving things forward, or are they just kind of, sitting back and collecting money?
Right, it's a crucial difference.
Okay, and here's another area where Thiel kind of turns things upside down, his view on competition. He actually warns against getting too caught up in, like, intense rivalry. Says it can be really destructive.
Yeah, it sounds kind of counterintuitive.
Totally. We always hear that competition is what drives innovation.
Exactly. But Thiel flips that on its head. He says too much competition can actually stop companies from focusing on what's really important, which is making great products and services. And he uses a really unexpected analogy to explain this. Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet.
Okay, now that connection, I have to admit, is not immediately obvious.
I know, right? It's like, how does Shakespeare fit into all this? Well, think about the Montagues and the Capulets, right? They're so consumed by their rivalry.
Yeah, it defines them.
And it ends up destroying them, right? Thiel says the same thing can happen in business.
So instead of focusing on building something truly new, companies get stuck in this back and forth, just trying to be a little bit better than the other guy.
Yeah, and nobody really wins in the end. He uses the example of like Microsoft and Google.
Oh yeah, they were so focused on each other.
That they both missed the rise of Apple, who came in and kind of leapfrogged over both of them. And he gives another concrete example. The fight over those mobile credit card readers.
Oh, right, like Square.
Yeah, Square, NetSecure, Intuit, PayPal, they all rushed to get these things out there, and it led to this huge battle, but it didn't really help anyone in the end.
So for those of us who are listening, what industries do you see this happening in right now, where everyone's so busy fighting that nobody's really winning?
That's a great question to think about. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the power law.
Okay, the power law. I hear that term a lot in the startup world. What does it actually mean?
It's basically this idea that a small number of things have a huge impact, Like in venture capital, most of the returns come from just a handful of investments.
So it's not about hitting singles and doubles. It's about finding those home runs.
Exactly. And this has big implications for entrepreneurs because it means that it might be more valuable to own a small piece of a company that's growing really fast than to own like 100% of a company that's going nowhere.
It's kind of like joining a rocket ship as a crew member versus being the captain of a sinking ship.
Right. Even if you own the whole ship, if it's sinking, it doesn't matter. And Thiel backs this up with some pretty impressive data. Venture-backed companies, they're less than 1% of all new businesses in the U.S.
That's tiny.
But they create 11% of all the private sector jobs.
Wow.
And generate revenue that's equal to 21% of the whole GDP.
It's crazy how a few companies can have such a big impact.
So when you're thinking about what you want to do, consider the power law. Do you want to start your own thing or join a company that's really taking off? There are risks and rewards to both paths.
Definitely something to weigh. Okay, now, Thiel doesn't just talk about the big ideas. He also gets into the nitty-gritty of building a successful company. And one thing he emphasizes is distribution.
Yeah, he totally busts the myth that, if you build it, they will come. You got to get your product in front of people.
It's that last mile that often gets overlooked.
Totally, especially in Silicon Valley, where everyone's so focused on making cool technology, they sometimes forget about actually selling it.
It's got to be more than just a cool idea.
Exactly. And Thiel tells this great story about how PayPal tried to use Scotty from Star Trek as their spokesperson.
What? Really?
Yeah, they thought it would be brilliant marketing, but it completely flopped.
That's hilarious. So sometimes you got to think outside the box, but you got to know your audience too.
Yeah, you got to find a way to connect with people that actually resonates with them.
And the best companies, they just have that figured out.
They make it seem effortless, but it's an art. Distribution can really make or break a company.
Okay, and one other thing that really stood out to me was Thiel's thoughts on how humans and computers can work together, especially with all this talk about AI.
Right. It's easy to get scared that computers are going to take over all the jobs.
Replace us altogether.
Exactly. But Thiel has a more, I guess, nuanced view. He says we should think of computers as tools, tools that can actually help us.
Like partners almost.
He uses the analogy of like specialized trading partners, how we all benefit from trading with people who have different skills and stuff.
Right. We can't all be good at everything.
Exactly. So we can also benefit from working with computers because they're like these super specialized partners that can help us do things we could never do on our own.
It's not about man versus machine.
It's man with machine.
And Thiel says that focusing on this partnership is actually how we can escape all that pressure from competition, in a globalized world.
So instead of trying to compete with like low-wage workers in other countries, we should focus on developing new technology that helps us solve really tough problems.
And create new things that have real value.
Exactly.
He also warns against getting too caught up in the hype around big data and AI.
Yeah, those technologies are amazing, but we shouldn't forget about human ingenuity,
Human creativity.
Exactly. The best companies in the future, they're not just going to ask, like, what problems can computers solve? They're going to ask how computers can help humans solve problems.
That's a whole different way of thinking about it.
Right. And that's a key shift. It's not about replacing human intelligence. It's about making it even better with AI.
Okay, now all this talk about ever smarter computers, it does raise the question, are they a threat to humanity? I think we all kind of have that fear. Like, are the machines going to take over?
Yeah, it's a valid concern. But Thiel says we should focus on the opportunities, not just the fears. He says strong AI, like computers that are smarter than humans in every way, that might be a possibility sometime way in the future, but it's not something we need to worry about right now.
He's saying focus on the present.
Right, and make plans for the future that we can actually, act on now.
So don't get bogged down in what might happen 100 years from now.
Exactly. And he points out that there's a middle ground between those who want to stop all technology,
Like the Luddites.
Yeah, and those who just blindly embrace every new gadget.
So be thoughtful about it.
Right. Use technology to build a better world, not just for technology's sake.
Okay, now let's talk about secrets. Thiel's got some pretty interesting ideas about the importance of secrets in building a successful business.
Yeah, this is where he really goes against the grain. In a world where everyone's obsessed with sharing everything, he says, secrets are power.
Kind of countercultural.
Totally. He believes that secrets are the key to unlocking new knowledge and creating something truly valuable.
And he takes it pretty far. He compares a great company to a conspiracy.
Right. A group of people working together to change the world, bound by this shared secret.
Sounds a little dramatic, but I get the point.
Yeah, and he makes it clear that not all secrets are created equal, right? Some are just trivia, but others are like these profound truths that can unlock incredible value. The challenge is finding the ones that really matter.
And protecting them.
Exactly. Thiel says don't share your secrets too freely, only with people who absolutely need to know, your trusted allies.
Your co-conspirators.
Yeah. He even uses the example of the U.S. Constitution, how the founding fathers were able to create this lasting document because they worked in secret, away from all the pressure of public opinion.
So a little bit of secrecy can be a good thing?
Yeah, it allows you to develop your ideas without interference.
Okay, but that raises a question. How do you balance keeping secrets with the need to build a team and attract investors?
Right. It's a tricky balance. You got to share enough to get people excited, but you also got to protect the core ideas that make your company unique.
So how do you do that?
Thiel says focus on your mission, on your team. Attract people who are passionate about what you're doing, who share your values.
People you can trust.
Exactly. Like at PayPal, the early team, they were all obsessed with creating a new kind of digital currency. They didn't all have the same backgrounds, but they believed in the mission.
And that shared belief, that's what bound them together.
Exactly. Thiel even compares successful startups to cults.
Cults, right.
Well, in the sense that they have this strong internal culture and a shared belief in something that outsiders might not get.
So they're a little bit different, a little bit rebellious.
Exactly. He says it's better to be called a cult or even a mafia than to just blend in with everyone else.
So be bold, be different, be memorable.
Right. And that actually leads into another important point, which is sales and distribution.
Ah, yes. Sales, the often forgotten part of building a business.
Totally. So many people, especially in Silicon Valley, they underestimate how important it is to actually get your product out there. There's this myth that great products will sell themselves, but as Thiel says, that almost never happens.
You gotta hustle.
You gotta hustle.
Yeah.
He even references The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where Earth is founded by a bunch of salespeople who are kicked off their own planet.
Okay, that's a new one.
It's funny, but it makes a point. Sales are crucial.
It's how you get your product into people's hands.
Exactly. And Thiel says the best sales are often invisible, like we don't even realize we're being sold to.
Subliminal messaging.
Kind of. He points out that a lot of people whose jobs involve distribution, their titles don't even say sales. They're account executives, business development managers, whatever.
But they're all selling something.
Exactly. We encounter sales all the time without even realizing it. And he also emphasizes that distribution follows this power law too,
Okay, how so?
Well, it means that one way of getting your product out there is probably going to be way more effective than all the others combined.
So find that one channel that works and go all in on it.
Exactly. It's better to focus on one thing that works really well than to try to do everything at once. And he also says it's important to sell your company to employees and investors just like you sell your product to customers.
You're always selling something.
Always selling. Whether you're an employee, a founder, an investor, everyone's selling something.
Even if your company is just you and your laptop, you're still selling your skills and ideas,
Exactly. It's a good reminder that being able to communicate and persuade people, that's essential for success, no matter what you do.
Okay, now let's switch gears again and talk about clean tech. This is an industry that Thiel has some pretty strong opinions about.
Ah, yeah, clean tech. Remember that huge boom and bust in the 2000s?
Yeah, lots of hype, then lots of disappointment.
Exactly. Thiel was really critical of that whole clean tech bubble, and his analysis of why so many companies failed is really insightful. He lays out 7 key questions that any startup should ask itself, and he uses the failures of those clean tech companies to show how getting those questions wrong can lead to disaster.
Okay, so what are these 7 questions?
Let's go through them one by one. The first one is the engineering question. Can you create breakthrough technology? Not just like small improvements,
Like real innovation.
Yeah, and Thiel says that most clean tech companies, they didn't do that.
They overpromised and underdelivered.
Exactly. He uses the example of wind turbines, right? Developing a turbine that's like 20% more efficient in a lab, that might sound good, but In the real world, it's not enough to justify all the costs and risks.
Especially when customers are so used to hearing exaggerated claims.
Yeah, they're skeptical.
So you need something truly groundbreaking.
Thiel says you need to aim for 10x improvements.
10 times. That's a big jump.
It is, but that kind of improvement, that's what really gets people's attention.
Okay, question number 2. The timing question. Is now the right time to start your business? Thiel says a lot of those clean tech companies, they launched at the wrong time.
They didn't read the market correctly.
Yeah, they got swept up in all the excitement and the government subsidies, and they thought the market was ready for them, but it wasn't.
So even if you have a great idea, timing is everything.
It is. Thiel contrasts this with the microprocessor industry, which saw like explosive growth from the very beginning. But solar technology, that had been around for decades, but it was moving really slowly.
So it's about understanding the pace of the market.
Right. And even if you enter a slow-moving market, you need a really clear plan for how you're going to take it over. A lot of those clean tech companies, they didn't have that.
They were just hoping for the best.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay, the third question is the monopoly question. Are you starting with a big share of a small market? Thiel's big on this idea of dominating a niche before you try to take over the world.
Start small, then go big. Exactly. And he says a lot of those clean tech companies, they went after these huge generic markets right from the start. Like they talk about being part of the global solar market or whatever.
Instead of finding their niche.
Right. He uses the example of Facebook, you know?
Oh yeah, how they started as a social network for just one college.
Exactly. That focus, that's what allowed them to grow so quickly. Okay, the fourth question is the people question. Do you have the right team? Thiel noticed that a lot of those clean tech companies were run by people who weren't actually tech people, you know?
More business people than engineers.
Yeah, lots of MBAs, not enough engineers. And he saw that as a big warning sign.
So the passion for the technology itself, that's really important.
Totally. He even had this rule at his venture capital firm, Founders Fund, that they wouldn't invest in any company where the founders wore suits and ties to pitch meetings.
No suits allowed.
It's funny, but it makes a point. The best companies are built by people who are obsessed with the technology, not just the business side of things. Okay, the fifth question is the distribution question. Do you have a way to not just make your product, but actually get it to customers?
Distribution, that last mile.
Yeah, so many clean tech companies, they focused on making their cool gadgets, but they forgot about distribution. They didn't figure out how to actually reach their customers.
And if you can't reach your customers, you don't have a business.
You got it. Thiel uses the example of Better Place, that electric vehicle startup. They spent tons of money building these battery swapping stations, but they couldn't sell enough cars.
So they had the infrastructure, but not the customers.
Right. It's a classic example of how you need a viable business model, not just a cool product. Okay, question number 6, the durability question. Will your company still be around in 10 or 20 years?
Thinking long term.
Yeah, and a lot of those clean tech companies, they didn't. They just assumed that the market for clean energy would keep growing forever, but they didn't think about competition or what would happen if regulations changed.
So you need to build something sustainable, something that can withstand the test of time.
Exactly. Thiel's big on building companies that create lasting value, not just companies that exploit a temporary opportunity. Okay, and finally, the 7th question, the secret question. Have you found a unique opportunity that other people haven't?
Like a hidden gem.
Yeah. Thiel believes the best companies are built around secrets.
Things that other people have missed.
Right. He says a lot of those clean tech companies, they were all chasing the same trends. They weren't looking for a different path. But the best entrepreneurs, they're the ones who are willing to look where other people aren't looking, you know?
To think differently.
Exactly. He uses Tesla as an example of a company that got all 7 of these questions right.
Oh yeah, Tesla, they were like the poster child for clean tech success.
Right. They had a breakthrough technology. They understood the timing. They started in a niche market. They had a great team. They mastered distribution. They built a durable business. And they had a unique vision that nobody else saw.
They checked all the boxes.
They did. So Tesla's success is a good example of how powerful it can be to really think through these 7 questions. Even in a tough industry, you can build a successful business if you focus on innovation, timing, market selection, team building, distribution, durability, and secrets.
So Tesla's success is a great example of how answering these 7 questions correctly can lead to a thriving business, even in a challenging industry. But now, Let's take a step back and think about this from a more personal perspective.
Yeah, let's bring it back to you, to your own life and what you want to do.
Thiel's big on this idea that we shouldn't just be, like, watching the future happen. We should be out there making it happen. He says the universe, the planet, our countries, our companies, our lives, they're all singular.
Like, there's only one of each of them?
And we have this power to shape our own destinies, to actually make a difference.
That's a powerful thought. So what does that mean for you? How can you take these ideas and apply them to your own life?
That's a big question. What's that one area where you think, man, we need some serious innovation here, and how could you be a part of that?
That's something to really think about.
Okay, now shifting gears a bit, Thiel also talks about something he calls the founder's paradox. He's talking about the psychology of the people who start companies.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, right? He says founders often have these traits that seem like totally contradictory. They can be super confident, but also really insecure.
Visionary, but also practical.
Right, like they're dreaming big, but they also have their feet on the ground.
And they could be rebellious, but also disciplined.
Yeah, they got to be able to break the rules, but also be able to get things done.
It's a unique combination.
Totally. And he uses some pretty striking examples, drawing from his own experience at PayPal. Like 4 of the 6 founders had built bombs in high school.
Whoa, seriously?
Yeah, 5 of them were 23 or younger.
They were just kids.
And 4 of them weren't even born in the U.S. So not exactly your typical, buttoned-up entrepreneurs.
Sounds like a pretty wild bunch.
They were. And Thiel's point is that these, extreme traits, these contradictions, they're actually what makes founders successful.
Because they're not afraid to be different.
Exactly. They need that outsider mentality, that willingness to challenge the norm.
See things differently.
Yeah, because if you want to do something truly new, you can't just follow the crowd. He uses this image of like an inverse normal distribution, how most people cluster around the average.
Yeah, the bell curve?
Right. But founders, they're out there on the tails of the curve. They're the outliers.
So maybe you need a little bit of that unconventional thinking to really break new ground.
Maybe we all do. It's interesting. He also compares successful founders to celebrities.
Celebrities? How so?
Well, think about people like Richard Branson, or even like the more tragic figures like Howard Hughes or Steve Jobs. They're both admired and scrutinized.
They're in the spotlight.
Exactly. And it just shows how intense that founder's journey can be. There are huge highs and lows. They're often misunderstood, criticized, sometimes even destroyed by the very forces they're trying to disrupt.
It's a high-stakes game?
It is. But Thiel also says that's part of what makes them so valuable. They're the ones who are willing to push the boundaries, to take risks.
To challenge the status quo?
Exactly. They're the ones who are building the future, even if it means putting themselves out there.
Okay, so let's shift gears again and talk about Thiel's thoughts on the long-term future.
Right.
He lays out 4 possible scenarios: recurrent collapse, plateau, extinction, and takeoff.
It's like he's looking to a crystal ball.
Trying to make sense of where we're headed. So, recurrent collapse, that's like the cyclical rise and fall of civilizations, right?
Uh-huh. But he thinks that's less likely now, with the world being so interconnected. And extinction, well, that's the big unknown. Nobody knows for sure.
The ultimate end game.
Right. But a plateau where progress just kind of stalls out, that's a real possibility. And he points to some trends that are already happening, like slower economic growth, political gridlock.
People feeling pessimistic about the future.
Exactly. But he also offers hope for takeoff. This scenario where technology just keeps advancing faster and faster, leading to a future that's completely different from what we can even imagine.
A future we can barely comprehend.
Right. He even uses the term singularity, that point where AI becomes more intelligent than humans.
That's a mind-blowing concept.
It is. But regardless of whether we reach that singularity, Thiel says what matters is whether we take advantage of the opportunities to create new things right now in our own lifetimes.
So don't wait for the future. Build it now.
Exactly. He challenges us to think about what going from 0 to 1 means in our own lives. What's one area where you think innovation is desperately needed? What could you do to contribute to a better future?
It's a call to action,
Yeah.
He's saying the universe, our planet, our companies, our lives, they're all singular. We have this power to shape our own destinies.
That's a powerful message. And it really gets to the heart of what 0 to 1 is all about. Taking ownership and making a difference.
Okay, now let's get into something a bit more concrete. Thiel talks about what he calls the 7 questions that every startup should consider. And he uses the clean tech industry as a case study. Why so many companies in that sector failed.
Yeah, it's a great way to illustrate these principles.
So what are these 7 questions that every startup, not just clean tech companies, should be asking themselves?
Well, let's break them down one by one. The first one is the engineering question. Can you create a breakthrough technology? Not just incremental improvements, but something truly new and innovative.
Like a quantum leap forward.
Exactly. And Thiel says a lot of those clean tech companies, they stumbled right here. They overestimated the impact of their technologies. They thought they were creating something groundbreaking, but it was really just a marginal improvement.
They overpromised and underdelivered.
Exactly. He uses the example of wind turbines, right? Developing a turbine that's like 20% more efficient in a lab might sound impressive, but
Right.
in the real world, it's often not enough to justify the cost and risk.
Especially when customers are bombarded with these exaggerated claims all the time.
Yeah, they're skeptical. So you need a significant advantage to really get their attention. Thiel suggests aiming for 10x improvements.
10 times, that's a bold goal.
It is, but that kind of improvement demonstrates clear superiority.
Makes it hard to ignore.
Right. Okay, the second question is the timing question. Is now the right time to start your business? And Thiel says that a lot of those clean tech companies, they launched at the wrong time.
They got caught up in the hype.
Exactly. There were all these government subsidies, and everyone was talking about clean energy, so they thought the market was ready, but it wasn't moving as fast as they thought.
So even a great idea can fail if the timing is off.
Absolutely. He contrasts this with like the microprocessor industry, which saw this explosive growth from the very beginning. But solar technology, that had been around for decades, but progress was slow.
So it's about understanding the pace of the market.
Exactly. And even if you're entering a slow-moving market, you need a really clear plan for how you're going to dominate it. A lot of those clean tech companies, they didn't have that.
They're just kind of winging it.
Pretty much. Okay, the third question is the monopoly question. Are you starting with a big share of a small market? Thiel's a big believer in dominating a niche before you try to expand.
Start small, then go big.
Exactly. And he says a lot of those clean tech companies, they made the mistake of going after these huge generic markets right from the start. Like, they talked about being part of the global solar market or whatever, but they didn't focus on a specific niche where they could win.
They spread themselves too thin.
Right. Think about Facebook. They started as a social network for just one college. That focus, that's what allowed them to grow so quickly.
It's like building a strong foundation before you build the skyscraper.
Exactly. Okay, the fourth question is the people question. Do you have the right team? And Thiel noticed that a lot of those clean tech companies were run by teams that didn't have a lot of technical expertise.
More business people than engineers.
Yeah, and he saw that as a red flag. He believes that real technologists, the people who are going to build groundbreaking companies, they're passionate about the technology itself, not just the business side of things.
It's got to be more than just a money-making scheme.
Exactly. He even had this rule at Founders Fund, his venture capital firm, that they wouldn't invest in any company where the founders showed up to pitch meetings wearing suits and ties.
No suits allowed.
It's funny, but it makes a point. The best companies are often built by people who are deeply immersed in the technology.
Okay, the fifth question is the distribution question. Do you have a way to not just create your product, but also deliver it to customers?
Yeah, distribution, that's often the missing piece. So many clean tech companies, they focused all their energy on developing the technology, but they didn't think enough about how they were going to get it into people's hands.
They forgot about the last mile.
Exactly. Thiel uses the example of Better Place, that electric vehicle startup, right? They spent a ton of money building these battery swapping stations, but they couldn't sell enough cars to make it work.
They had the infrastructure, but not the market.
Right. It's a reminder that you need a viable business model, not just a cool product.
Okay, question number 6. The durability question. Will your company still be around in 10 or 20 years? Are you building something that can stand the test of time?
That's the question, right? And a lot of those clean tech companies, they didn't really think long term. They just assumed the market for clean energy would keep growing. But they didn't think about how competition might heat up or how regulations might change.
So you need to build something sustainable, something with a lasting competitive advantage.
Exactly. Thiel's a big believer in building companies that create lasting value, not just companies that exploit a temporary trend.
Okay, and finally, the 7th question, the secret question. Have you identified a unique opportunity that other people haven't? Thiel believes that the best companies are built around secrets.
Yeah, it's about finding those hidden gems, those insights that everyone else has overlooked.
And he says a lot of those clean tech companies, they were all chasing the same trends. They weren't looking for a different path.
Right. They weren't thinking like contrarians.
But the best entrepreneurs, they're the ones who are willing to look where other people aren't, you know.
To think differently, to challenge conventional wisdom.
And Thiel uses Tesla as an example of a company that got all 7 of these questions right.
Yeah, Tesla, they're the exception that proves the rule, you know?
So let's unpack how Tesla tackled each of these questions.
Sure. First of all, they had a breakthrough technology. Their cars offered a significant performance advantage over other electric vehicles, you know? They combined speed, range, and style in a way that nobody else had done before.
They were in a league of their own.
Exactly. They weren't just incrementally better, they were something completely different.
And second, they understood the timing. They launched at a moment when government subsidies and public interest in clean energy were both peaking.
Right, they rode that wave. Thiel points out that Tesla got a $465 million loan from the Department of Energy back in 2010, at a time when those kinds of subsidies were unheard of.
So they were in the right place at the right time.
They were. And third, they started with a big share of a small market. They initially focused on selling these high-performance sports cars to a niche market of wealthy early adopters.
So they built a loyal following among those early customers.
Exactly. And that gave them the foundation to expand into more mainstream markets later on.
And fourth, they had the right team. Elon Musk, their CEO, he's a brilliant engineer and a visionary leader.
Yeah. And he surrounded himself with other talented engineers and designers who were all passionate about building the best electric cars in the world.
They were a team on a mission.
They were. And fifth, they mastered distribution. They built their own network of showrooms and charging stations so they could control the entire customer experience.
They didn't rely on traditional dealerships?
Nope, they did it their own way. And sixth, they built a durable business. They secured a strong patent portfolio and established a reputation for innovation, so it's really hard for competitors to catch up.
They built a moat around their business.
They did. And seventh, they identified a unique opportunity that nobody else saw. They recognized the potential for electric cars to become a mainstream form of transportation, not just a niche product for early adopters.
They saw the future.
They did. So Tesla's success, it's a testament to the power of getting these 7 questions right. Even in a challenging industry like clean tech, you can build a thriving business if you focus on innovation, timing, market selection, team building, distribution, durability, and secrets.
So it's not just about building companies, it's about building a better future.
Yes, exactly. It's about having that founder's mindset, that drive to create something new and valuable no matter what you're doing.
And to not just accept things as they are.
Right. Thiel says you are not a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
You're not just like at the mercy of chance, you know.
You have agency,
Yeah.
you can make choices, take action.
Exactly. And he talks about this in his closing thoughts, you know, where he's looking at the future of humanity and technology. He lays out these 4 possible scenarios, kind of like paths we could go down.
Oh yeah, I remember this part. It was kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah. So first, there's recurrent collapse, where civilizations, they rise and fall like a cycle, you know.
Well, history repeating itself.
Uh-huh. But he thinks that's less likely now because the world's so connected, right?
Globalized.
Exactly. Then there's extinction, the ultimate end, you know.
Nobody wants to think about that one too much.
Right. It's the big unknown. But then there's a plateau, this idea that progress just kind of slows down, stalls out.
Stagnation. That's almost scarier in a way, like just being stuck.
Yeah, it's unsettling. And he sees some signs of that already, like slower economic growth, political gridlock, people just feeling kind of pessimistic, you know?
Yeah, I can see that.
But then there's the fourth scenario, takeoff. This is where things get really interesting.
Yeah, this is the optimistic one.
Right. This is where technology keeps advancing faster and faster, and it leads to a future that's totally different from anything we can imagine right now.
Like a whole new level of existence.
Exactly. He even talks about the singularity, you know, where artificial intelligence becomes smarter than humans.
That's still hard to wrap my head around.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. But Thiel's point is, whether or not we reach that singularity, what matters is what we create right now in our own lifetimes.
So focus on the present.
Exactly. Make those 0 to 1 moments happen, you know? Break new ground, build new things, don't wait for the future to come to you.
So as we wrap up here, what are your biggest takeaways from 0 to 1? What really resonated with you?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is this idea of thinking big, not just accepting the world as it is, but asking, like, what could it be? What could I create?
And how can you apply that to your own life,
Yeah.
to your own ambitions?
Yeah.
That's the challenge, right?
It is, but it's an exciting one.
It is. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. Hopefully you found this exploration thought-provoking and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
We hope it's giving you some new ideas about startups, innovation, and the future.
Because remember, the future's not set in stone,
Yeah.
It's something we create, one bold idea at a time, one courageous act at a time, one 0 to 1 moment at a time.
Keep jiving, everyone.
Until next time.